Welcome to EdTech Speaks, a podcast bringing guests together to share their expertise and advice on navigating business and education in a technology-driven world. From entrepreneurs to vendors, higher education to corporate leaders, we'll uncover their perspective regarding the latest trends and technologies impacting your career or business. Our podcast is made possible by Downing EdTech Consulting, where people and technology connect. Hosted by Cher Downing, an experienced executive spanning a higher education and corporate career with specific focus on the EdTech industry. Dr. Downing is also an international and national presenter, author, and regular media contributor. Now here is your host, EdTech strategist, Dr. Cher Downing.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to EdTech Speaks, where we invite guests to share their expertise on navigating the digital innovation of learning, business, and technology. And we're dealing with this in today's global landscape. I'm your host, Cher Downing, and I just want to introduce, and I'm excited to have someone on board here today, Chris Fenning, who is a recent author of a new book, 39 Ways to Make Training Stick, What to Do After Training Leaves the Room. And I'm very excited about this also because I was able to give a tiny little contribution to Chris's book, which is fabulous. But welcome today, Chris.
Oh, sure. Thank you very much for having me on the show. It's a real pleasure to be here.
So, and for our listeners and viewers, so you know, Chris and I belong to a group, and so we have known each other for quite a while, and Chris put out a call for some information for his book, and many of us were fortunate enough to contribute and get selected, but this is actually our first face-to-face, so that's also just, you know, indicative of the digital world. We've had a relationship for a while, and today is the first day we're actually getting to see each other, so it's exciting.
Isn't that weird? It's so bizarre. But we've communicated, we've conversed, we've had conversations, but through text. Yeah. We just haven't happened to get on video or on audio together. And yeah, it's really nice to see you.
You as well. So I'm excited to bring this to our audience because I've spent a lot of years in higher ed and in corporate training, and I know the value of training, but I also know we have a limited value. We bring a trainer in, we get all excited. We bring a trainer in, we do the training, everyone's hyped up about it, and then everyone goes back to their office. We forget about it. It gets shelved. So I was really excited to talk about your book today and also about, you know, your background and what you do. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got through this journey to your book.
So how did I get to 39 ways? Well, in the beginning, it started with, before I do what I do now, I had a series of normal jobs. So I was employed. So my educational background is aerospace engineering, satellite design engineering, and I worked in techie type roles for a few years in multiple companies. Traveled around the world working with some big names, sort of Samsung, Apple, a lot of mobile telco providers and defense companies. And then I made a very obvious shift into healthcare in the US because that's a normal segue that people do. And the reason for the change was I was following my wife's career and she got a great opportunity in the US. So we moved there and I took on a project management role for a US healthcare company and spent about 6 years rising up to a fairly senior position in a very large US company and doing a lot of communication for myself, for my teams. And I ended up being the guy who would deliver bad news to important people and became known as a good communicator in the organization. And then about 4 years ago, at the time of recording this, so around 2020, my wife and I decided to leave the States, and I chose to change careers completely at that point. And I left employment to focus full-time on communication. And I spent 3 years writing communication books, delivering communication training. So I'd gone from doing it on the side, and I'd been training within the organization for many years, to then training full-time and writing and speaking, and all on the topic of communication until August of 2023, when in the group that you mentioned that we're part of, the Recognized Expert Group, there was a little question about what do you guys and girls all do to help people remember what you train? And that one question sparked a huge conversation that we were both a part of, and we were all putting in the ideas that we have. And I realized at that moment that every single client that I'd either had or potential client that I didn't convert into a sale or I wasn't the right fit for, every single client had asked me what I would do to make training stick. What would I do to help people remember? And so the conversation in our group, the experience that I'd had over multiple years doing this, all came together and said, there's really a need here. And I think I've got some pretty good answers. And then I went out and validated that. I came and asked you and asked a bunch of other people, what do you do? Put it all together, and out came the book.
And it's brilliant. It's brilliant for a number of reasons. And I encourage everyone who deals with training, even if you're not a trainer, if you're someone who is responsible for bringing training in, if you have a small team that you just want to do some, different types of activities with, if you're really trying to grow people, bottom line, it's a brilliant book. And I say this because it's not like a typical here's what you need to be doing book. Oftentimes when we get those books, it tells us it's our way or the highway. We have all worked with a training company. We've all bought into a training system, an organized system, and they say, do it our way and you'll be successful. Don't do it our way. And sorry, you won't make it. And I made some notes here because I love the way the book is written. So it talks about, very first thing, how to use this book. And you give some great pointers about really what is a customized experience. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yes, the first couple of lines in there is, I do not expect you to read this book cover to cover. If you want to, go right ahead. But this is not how the book is designed to be used. And that encompasses really the whole purpose of the book. There are 39 ways in the book. Clue is in the title. And the reason for so many ways is one way to make training stick doesn't work in every situation. And in fact, when you have a training topic, you may find a different training audience for that topic requires a different method. For example, if you're in a very formal business environment, email tips as a reminder after training might be useful. If you're working with a bunch of 20-somethings, though it's a terrible way to communicate with them. If you're working with teachers teaching in sub-Saharan Africa, well, they don't have access to data. So doing anything on mobile phones or internet-based is going to be a challenge. So you need to do more live events or something that's paper-based. And those few examples show, it's quite a broad range of examples I've pulled on there, but those show why one method doesn't work in every situation. And that's why you can't do them all for every topic. You don't need to read the book cover to cover, but it's a resource for you to then find things that could really work for you, whatever the situation you're facing.
So I'm a huge book hoarder. I'll be honest. I have bookcases upon bookcases in my office. And one of the things that I went through and looked at was how many books have I kept over the years? Some of my books are 30 plus years old that are just dog-eared and sticky notes and flags and all, because it's something I can go back to time and time again. Yeah. Out of 4 bookcases filled with books, every nook and cranny, it's not very attractive, but they hold, 5 books. 5 books. Now, I read books on assessment, on design, on, teaching and learning, on business, on everything. 5 books out of all the books that I own are ones that I always go back to when somebody says, what do you do with this? Or I'm working with a client and they say, we need to fix this problem. Why? Because it's a guide, and it's an opportunity to really customize and help the client, as opposed to saying, well, if you just order this book in and have all your people read it, we'll all be on the same page. It never works.
People don't read it. Oh, that's why anyone listening to this who wants to write a book, I implore you, write a short book, because nobody recommends a book they don't finish.
Yep. And, with audiobooks, it's even worse because I can turn you off instantly and be like, this really isn't what I want. It's like
Yep.
watching TV. You start watching a show and you think, I'm not really interested. It didn't catch me. So I just changed the channel.
Yep.
Books are becoming that way because of audio. I love that you give step by step how to do the activities. So I don't have to figure out how to make this work. I can take it. It's a blueprint for me. I get moving forward. I
Isn't it
love that.
frustrating? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No,
Isn't it
go
frustrating
ahead.
when you get a book and it's all good ideas, but doesn't tell you how? It's
Yep.
here's what you should do. You're like, great, you've told me the thing I should do. Now what? And then you have to go and still figure it out for yourself. And those kind of big ideas books have value, but it feels like only half the story. And then you're left with,
Mhm.
like, I want to do this, but now I'm even less sure because I definitely don't know how to do it. And all the books
Absolutely.
that I write are practical how-to guides because that's the most valuable thing. I buy a book I write for myself, essentially. I just write my own reference guide. And I want a book that then actually shows me how to do it. I have a problem. I've bought the book to help me as a solution. So the book really should contain the answers. And that's why each of the 39 ways has literal step 1, step 2, step 3. They've almost all got examples. I couldn't fit
Yep.
every example into the book because some of the ways include a workbook, and it's hard to fit a book inside a book without really blowing up the page count. But they're linked to, so you can go and download digital versions and so on. And all of that is because I use it. This is a book for me as much as for other educators. Every time I have a new course or every time I go to a new audience, I consider, have I got the right make it stick method for that topic, for that audience, for that delivery method? And I don't have to start from a blank page. I literally follow the instructions in the book. It's very lazy.
No, it's not lazy. It's the same thing you would do if you were a trainer and you were getting organized to offer a training, right? You're thinking through your outline, you're thinking through what you're going to do. And one of the things that I don't think trainers realize, we hire people, we train them. You're going to be a train the trainer, in your organization, or we hire a professional trainer, right? Because they've had all this experience. They know how to communicate. They know they present well. They know how to capture an audience. What we never tell them is they're salespeople. Bottom line, because you come into a room full of employees who don't want to be part of the training, are upset that they're not getting the work done on their desk. You're wasting their time. It's not something they want to learn. I mean, I could go on and on. And so you walk in, and when you walk in to do that, it's really hard when you're not ready to sell. You have got to sell them on this training. And what will most people tell you? Oh, we'll forget it in a month. Oh, they're not going to do anything. It's going to go on the shelf. I have heard that throughout my entire career where I'm like, oh, this sounds
Yep.
interesting. They're like, yeah, it won't matter. We won't do anything once it's done.
Oh, yeah, because the environment
People
hasn't
know.
changed. They go straight back into pre-existing habits, it's a very human thing. It's not, and
Yep.
it's nobody's fault.
No.
That's the way we're programmed. We are literally creatures of habit. And
Yeah.
that's a challenge that as trainers we need to overcome. Now, hopefully this won't take us too far away from the core topic here, but I think there's a little bit of it's a dirty little secret in our industry. And we as trainers have known for years, for decades, that training doesn't stick. There's something called the forgetting curve, or the Ebbinghaus curve is the formal name for it, about how much we all forget within an hour, a day, a week of training. And it's 50% within a day, or less than a day, and 70 to 90% of what we train is forgotten about within a week. And here's the little secret. We've known this for years, and our customers have known this. Businesses have known this for years, but it's not been their most pressing concern. What businesses have wanted is access to good quality training at an affordable price. And the last few years has given them that because of the explosion in online digital learning. Platforms like Coursera. Coursera, you can get a course from Stanford University for free online. How do we compete with that? And
Right.
yes, you can pay $50 and get the certificate and so on, and Coursera has 174 million users.
Yep.
That's a lot of people. That's a lot of corporations. Things like Udemy for Business, where a business can pay
Mhm.
$30 per person per month for unlimited access to good quality training. Businesses have had their biggest problem solved. They have access to good quality, affordable training, which has now cleared the way for them to say, now here's the problem we've all known about. How do we make it stick? Because why should
Yep.
they spend 100% of the price when people are only going to remember 30% of the content?
Exactly. And if they don't require it, if they say it's optional, you have optional access to training, people don't do it. And it's not because they're not interested. It's because their day is packed with meetings and work and other things. And it becomes secondary until the spring when you're getting near your end of year evaluation and you want to show that you've done something.
That's
I need a
the
certificate in
measure.
my folder. I need to show I did something. But again, even in education, students learn for the moment, pass the course, move to the next course, and forget at least half of what they learned the last time.
Yeah.
The other thing that I thought was interesting was when you talked about dealing as an independent trainer versus an in-house trainer, because I think
Mm.
that is so true in smaller organizations, particularly, or when we want a name brand type of training, we bring somebody in and they do a great job and we have a lovely time and maybe we buy everybody lunch or breakfast and we get them a t-shirt or a portfolio and then we send the trainer off and we all go back to our offices and say, that was great. We did a great, we pat ourselves. We did a great thing. We brought
Yeah.
something great to our masses. And then we totally forget about it. Or we say to the in-house trainer, here's the things we want you to get done this year. And as soon as they offer the training, we go, check mark. We said we wanted it. They offered it. We're good. There's no
Yeah.
follow-up. There's no tracking of it. And I think when we get deep into training, we have high-level training, how to be an effective leader, how to, run a team. And then we deep dive into things that are really specific to talent, that are specific to the type of people involved,
Mm.
all of those things. And those people are hungry to say, it was a great training, but how do I carry it forward? Because there was such a change for a week. Our team worked like magic. And then we all shifted back to the way we were.
Yeah. Yeah. Those old habits, they come in very fast. And often now we're skirting the edges of cultural and organizational change, because that's what training is the first step of. It's changing the habits and behaviors of an individual or a team or an organization. And those changes only happen if the environment supports the habit. So you mentioned performance reviews. So come around April time and wherever
Yeah.
people have them in the year, whether it's calendar year or mid-year, those metrics are what drive our behavior. If I'm measured on number of widgets built in a month, I'm going to focus on number of widgets I've built in a month. If I get to the end of the year and they say, oh, but you didn't do any training. Like, yeah, but all my pay is related to widgets built in a month. You bet I'm going to focus on that. So
Absolutely.
for training to stick, there is a duty of care for organizations to actually walk the walk, having talked the talk. They need to support that change in behavior. So if you train a team on something, you have to train the manager as well, and then give the manager tools to help the team. Not sticks to beat them with and charts to measure them and tell them where they failed, but help the help the team.
Well, and I think, and as all of you know, I am a huge proponent of online. But I am the first to tell you it doesn't fit everyone's learning style. It does not match what people need always when they need it. It is a matter of convenience. It is a nice opportunity. I was telling someone the other day, I said, Target kept their drive up option available here in the US. So you can order online, drive up, someone runs your stuff out to your car. It's post pandemic, but people got used to it and they liked it. So they decided to keep it. that's a wonderful thing when I'm in a hurry. Or maybe I'm someone who has small children and I don't want to get them in and out of the car, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, been there.
But what it does is it takes away that luxury time of wandering through the store, looking at things, buying things I don't need, but they look really cool, or I, just feel I have to have it. It doesn't replace that feeling of shopping and seeing what's new and what's out there and what's coming up for the next season. It's a tie over to just keep me going. Online training, if not done well, can be that. It's a tie over, but it doesn't carry you forward. And so what we see oftentimes is corporations do invest in their own learning and development people. They put their own online together in-house. They do all of that. But it's no different than if they brought in an outside organization. It doesn't move forward. So, what happens is these people, even in designing, still need to have access to ways to move these forward. What I loved in the book is when you talk about different delivery methods. And so, your book can span across different types of delivery methods because there's not one that's an end all. And depending upon where your team is located, what they do, who they are, what level they are, all of that can be impactful.
Yes, it can. And this also ties in with the internal external we talked about a moment ago. So delivering, let's use an example. So if you're delivering a culture change training program, which is a huge thing, there's lots of components to it. If you're working with culture change and as an organization, you've brought in an external trainer, when that trainer leaves, all of the good ideas leave with them and people go back to old habits. So there needs to be somebody inside, or at least one person, but preferably more, championing and helping maintain that momentum and the enthusiasm and reminding people to do these things. And the delivery method that external trainer could choose could be a live in-person follow-up once a month for the next 3 or 4 months. Now that's an expensive thing for a trainer to do, time, money, transport, etc. So there's a cost involved in that. But they could do online follow-ups, which then greatly reduces the cost and still provides that reinforcement and reminder. So we can change the delivery method and still have something that's live. It's just not live in person. And the topics that you're training on will help dictate what the better methods are. So I teach communication skills, and I couldn't do all of my communication skills follow-up just by email tips, because there's a lot more to communication than just text on a page. So there's video follow-ups, there's self-paced activities, there's community discussions. People then do their own videos and submit them back. There are lots of different formats that I can work with. I know somebody who does Excel tips. Theirs is all screenshots and videos. That's all they do, screenshots and videos. But it works because somebody who's using Excel then has the reference and they can do it at a self-pace and they have access to it when they're working on a particular problem, when they're having that pain point of doing something in Excel, they can refer to the material. Different methods, different delivery channels for different topics and purposes.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things that we struggle with, and we've always struggled with, is we feel an innate need to provide something when we offer training, whether that's we gather everyone in one room, you'll get lunch, you'll get a free book, so we spend all this money on, coffee mugs and t-shirts and all of these branded items because we think, oh boy, you're going to go back to your office and have this. But we don't want to spend the money on carrying training forward, which is not spending money. It's an investment. It's an investment in where you go. Many, many years ago, I worked for someone who had, he'll probably listen to this and start laughing. He would buy a book, such as your book, but he would share it with the C-suite. You had to pass it on and you had to make notes in it and mark what you thought was good, what you thought we could use, what you thought was interesting. Think about it. So March 1st, we start sharing the book. By May 1st, it should be
Mm.
through, the 12 people that are in the C-suite and need to do this. Well, there's a lot of pressure in the sense of, oh, I can't let that book just sit on my desk. I have to do something with it, right? Because somebody
Yeah.
else has got to have it. And so, at the end of it, he said, you probably all thought I was crazy. Why did we share one book? He said, because if I buy you each a book, he said, 3 of you will read it cover to cover. He said, and then you'll just be able to regurgitate everything to me, but not really think about using it. He said, 3 of you will read half of it and try to give me just the highlights of the book. He said, so you'll tell me, quotes or cool things that were noted in there. He said, 3 of you will bring it in and say, yeah, I didn't get through it. He said, and 3 of you will have a dusty cover sitting on your desk.
With a coffee stain on the top of it.
And he's absolutely right. You looked around the table and everyone literally was pointing, going, oh, you're the book reader. Oh, you're the one that wouldn't have got, because we all knew each other well enough to know. But, the point of the exercise was, it's not just what we're doing today and what we got trained on. It's what we're doing tomorrow. And that's exactly what your book does, is talk to people about what to do tomorrow, where they're going next. But it also is undated material. That's the other thing that I like. It's not, here's the trendy thing everyone's doing, everyone do a TikTok and send it to each other. And then, 5 years from now, people are like, what's TikTok?
It's like business books that still talk about Enron.
Yes. Yeah.
Half a century ago that was relevant. So I love that you took away that it's timeless, because that's another thing that I really try to put into a book, is making it timeless. Now, there's sort of confession time. There are 2 exceptions to that. And I love that 98% of the book absolutely fits what you've described, and that it will still be usable in 10, 20 years' time. The difference is to try and make it as helpful as possible. I have included some examples of tools and services.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, digital flashcards. That's one tool that you could use, or even physical flashcards. They're both in there. There's a physical version and a digital version. I have listed some companies that provide those services. Sure. And that's the risk of things being dated. And the second one is there is one AI-based method. And so we'll see whether or not that becomes dated, or whether they all become AI in the future. But with those 2 exceptions, everything else it's practical. It's the steps to do it. And it should be valid no matter what your topic, what your country, your industry, your culture that you're in, and when you are using it. And that's the hallmark for me of a useful book, because I also don't then have to rewrite it every 3 years because things have moved on.
So tell us, what are you working on next now that you've given us this and we're ready to, go out and change the world?
Well, my primary business is communication skills. So I focus very much on practical communication situations at work and how to overcome them, how to be clear and concise, how to run good meetings, how experts can talk to non-experts. And so I have all of those books and courses and training and so on. But I now have the addition of a wonderful workshop on the 39 ways to make training stick. Ooh. And I had 2 just phenomenal events on a recent live tour in person in South Africa, where we ran half-day workshops with a couple of hundred training professionals. Some were internal, some independent, some were students who were wanting to take stuff back and see if they can inform in their get their professors to add some of this content, which is an interesting approach, but loved the enthusiasm. And we ran these 2 half-day workshops. So I'll be doing more of those, some online, some in person.
That's exciting. And I laugh because, having been a professor, having worked with students for years, that tells me that their professor is teaching the same information in the same way that they've always taught it for years and years and years. And, we used to have a level of respect where these were people, kind of on a pedestal, and we were going to learn from them, and that was good. But today's student has no problem popping up and saying, there's a better way to do this. Why are you still doing it this way? Because their whole world is about sharing. Their whole world is about communicating among themselves and not necessarily grading each other, but they are just saying, hey, did you know about this, or try this, or there's
Yeah.
something new. So I can see where your book could fit in very nicely in the classroom as well.
Good. I putting myself in the position of a lecturer, and tomorrow, in fact, I'm giving a couple of workshops at the university in the area that I live, and I'm just putting myself in the position of imagining a student coming up to me with a copy of the book and saying, "Do some of this." I'd be so mortified. I think grateful feedback is always good, but imagine a room full of students going, "You're not doing this stuff."
We're at a pivotal time in higher ed right now, because, and even in K through 12, we are now reaching the end of the age of children who have had limited access to technology of some sort. We are now dealing with kids who are fully immersed, who fully understand, and who start to recognize how they learn. They don't specify, oh, I'm a visual learner, or I'm an audio learner, but they know what sticks with them. And I think this is so interesting right now, because students recognize what sticks and how they learn better. And so when they go into a traditional classroom where it's just, what we always called sage on the stage, and I'm just, blaring out 3 hours of lecture to you sitting there, they're like, oh no, there's a better way to do this. It's fascinating, because for them, that may be the only time in their life that someone is actually talking towards them. Everything else they do, think about it. They do TikTok, they do, all of these social media. They text with their friends who are sitting right next to them. They're not even having a conversation. They're sitting and texting to each other. They're communicating with their parents by text. They send FaceTimes to their grandparents. They're on Facebook posting pictures so their grandparents can see them. They don't understand having someone talk to them nonstop for an hour and a half to 3 hours. They've never been in that kind of scenario. And then they get to college and get a professor who's been doing it this way for 30 plus years. And they're like, oh no, this is not how I learn. And I'm paying you to teach me. It's a very different vision for them.
It is. And that's where, this is a question, I almost phrase that as a statement. So is that why you think we're seeing a greater number of educational institutions moving towards problem-based learning?
Yes, absolutely. Kids want to be challenged now. It's the gamification. They've grown up on games. It's amazing to me, because I think back to when the PX5 first came out, very first version. We were sitting in an airport, and this kid had one, and his uncle worked in Japan, so he got one before they came to the US. Immediately, children came around and were circled around him, checking this thing out, just like, wow, this is something. So you fast forward to now, and every stroller that goes by, if the child can sit up, the child's on an iPhone, playing something, looking at something. Kids have iPads, or, the educational version, the Leapfrog, or, whatever other products are out there. But the bottom line is, the next time you go somewhere public, look around at the children. 90% of them have a piece of technology in their hand that they're using.
And 99% of the parents. And I say that as a parent.
Yes.
My daughter doesn't have a screen that she has access to most of the time, but it's a constant struggle to not like lean into that easy option. And our conversation now between my wife and I is, are we actually holding her back? Is she becoming technically behind her peers who are all able to interact with devices and so on? It's a really tough thing to do, to find what the right answer is. But there's something that you mentioned, there was one word which really stands out, and that's gamification. And that is such a powerful learning tool. The best example is Duolingo, the app to help you learn a language. The entire premise of Duolingo started as a PhD project to see whether gamification could change learning. And it became the biggest language learning tool on the planet, overtaking Rosetta Stone, which has held that sort of top spot for decades and decades. It's now Duolingo, and it's the gamification. And it's not just kids. Adults, humans love that win, 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 challenge, win approach that you get with gamification.
Well, I think of, you know, in the New York Times purchased it, but, you know, you get a Wordle every day. That guy built it for his girlfriend during the pandemic just to keep her occupied. You know,
I did not know that.
yeah,
What a
yeah.
wonderful story.
Built it at home, you know, gave her something because she likes to do word searches and all those kinds of things. New York Times was like, oh, he's on to something. Scooped it up. Now the New York Times every day has word match. You have to figure out what the four words, you know, are connected, what they all mean. You have a daily Wordle. You have all these different games now. Why?
Yep.
Because exactly what you said. We enjoy doing that, and we're competitive. We want to win.
Oh, yes. We like to publicize the, look, I'm a 3 out of 6 average on my Wordle, or I got it first time. Like, did you look it up first?
And the one that I love now is New York Times sends out one, it's a quiz on history. And you pull the little different boxes that talk about a historical happening or event, and you have to try to get them in the right date order. You know, and some of these are BC, some of these are, you know, 1903, some of these are 2010. But what I find is I learn because I read that and I'm like, oh, I had no idea that happened. And oh, I do remember that, but I thought it was later. And, you know, so they are teaching me without me knowing it. You know, I'm just playing a game and I'm trying to get the high score. That's my whole thing in the beginning.
Absolutely.
But then I'm reading and I'm like, oh, this is it. I did not know that occurred in Egypt, you know?
Yep. Oh, we love a challenge. We love a challenge. And in fact, challenges are they're one of the 39 ways. And there are a few different methods that play on that gamification. So there are quiz series that you can do, and then you could publicize the results. And if you want to do it live, you can use a platform like Kahoot, which then makes it really competitive if you're doing that in the training event. But you can continue that with very low cost and in many cases free online services that provide a quiz series with a leaderboard. So every week you send out your 3 quiz questions and there's a leaderboard. So you get that gamification. You can do it we talked earlier about the cost of doing these things. Supporting trainees after the training is done, after the training room lights go out, does not have to take a lot of time and money. There is so much low cost or no cost automation available. You could set up an email tip series with a link to a video. So if you create the videos, which is a time expense up front, you can host them on YouTube for free and use an email to send them out for free. And you've got drip fed reminders. That's an entirely free process. But you can then reuse those things. You could create a learning calendar for a particular topic and say, here are the things you need to learn and redo over the next 2 months. And you can reuse those videos, those email tip series. The quiz questions and that gamification can become part of it. And you can have actual challenges where you send out a scenario and people write up their response, what they believe the answer is, and it becomes a contest every month, which you might even be able to tie in with a recognition and reward. So you can mix and match from these different methods and bring in a low cost, low time way, gamification. And that'll work for a lot of people, but it won't work for everyone. But for those who didn't like the gamification, they might like the self-paced activities. So you can use a variety to hit all those different learning styles. But gamification is really going to help a lot of people get stuck in.
Absolutely. And I think the other audience that you touch that we clearly forget about every time is the new hires. Because there's nothing worse than getting hired into a company or into a job or a role, and they all had training last week. And you're just kind of odd man out. You don't know what they did. They're all still chattering about it. And you're like, okay, you know, and then
Yeah.
You don't feel part of it. I looked at the book and I'm like, I could pull a couple of things and say, hey, you didn't get to be at the training. Maybe we've got some videos or something you can watch, but here's some things I'm going to help you kind of catch up through these activities to get that
Yep.
information that everyone else got last week. So everyone's on a level playing field instead of spending the next 6 months saying, well, I don't understand why they're not doing what we're doing.
Yes. And then there's always an and. The more we can do. Hey, you missed the training, but here are the digital resources. Here's the video recap. You'll get the 10 short video snippets that come out with the key points. It's not the same as being there, but you'll get this info. And in 6 weeks' time, we have a live follow-up with the trainer. Go through the material over the next 6 weeks. Go with your questions. You'll be able to ask them directly.
Yep.
That is inclusive. It's not completely the same, but it addresses so many of those pain points that you just mentioned.
Training has become not just a necessity, but again, it's an investment to benefit your company, your business. As I work with startups, they are so gung-ho to get their widget out the door, and they're so gung-ho to, hopefully get it bought or grow or whatever their goals are. And they gather the right group of people, and they just don't always treat them very well. They just forget. They think once we're established, that's
ever moving.
Yeah. So,
always got to reach when we
all say that, once we do this will occur. It's a statement that is a placeholder that never actually reaches. And so what you end up with is you see turnover, where you've invested this person, and now you're worried because this person has all your golden secrets, right? You're a startup, so they know everything, and now they're going across the street. Doing things like this, it doesn't matter if you have 3 people on your team, if you have 100 people on your team, you have 1,000 people on your team. These activities you can customize to however many people you have. But the important thing is that you're also showing them that you care. We have lost the art of caring about our employees. We truly have, in so many ways.
Oh, yeah. And training is actually making that worse. So a company will invest in training. They'll pay thousands or tens of thousands to bring in people, run a program for a week, a residential course. Then the training ends. And 3 weeks later, the people who went through the training are being beaten over the head because they're not doing what they were trained to do. But the company provided nothing to bridge that gap. It was, well, we trained you. Why aren't you doing it now? And that. It's like anything with life. It's not just with children or with dogs where you think, you have to go through lots and lots of repetition. That's with us as well. Who among us get told something one time and are able to do it? And companies don't provide that support. So yes, we in the training profession, we absolutely need to offer make it stick methods. And companies need to recognize that they have to bring something to it as well to help integrate and to help continue that learning over time. Because we can't do it by ourselves, even internal trainers, especially external trainers, because when we're out, we're out.
Yeah.
So the companies have a role to play as well. And until that happens, the poor employees are going to be the ones beaten up and berated and told off for not doing the thing that they were taught 6 months ago with zero reinforcement support or make it stick methods. So a lot of change for all of us. It's not going to happen overnight, but really, really glad we're having the conversation. And I hope this sparks internal training development departments, managers, executives to really think about, are they getting the best value out of their training dollars? And are they supporting their employees in the best possible way?
Well, I will tell you, if they think of it in terms of what they work for in terms of value, do you train your person once and put them on the supply chain? Probably not, because the supply chain will break apart very, very quickly. You put a lot of investment into getting people prepared to work in the various aspects of your supply chain so that your product smoothly goes from point A to point B.
Yeah.
This is no different. It really isn't.
That's
Knowledge can be a supply chain just as much as I know how to pick up this widget and, put it on the conveyor belt.
Oh, yeah. And we see that in the cost of failed projects. Like 70 or 80% of projects and programs fail, as in they go way over time or way over budget. And it's very clear to the analogy of the supply chain or the building of stuff. You don't just put a newbie into a situation they're not really well trained for. And the only industries, I believe, this is now the world according to Chris, the only industries where we really do that are where lives are at stake.
Yes.
So air traffic controllers, fire service, military. How long do people spend going through basic training before they're ever allowed off the base to do anything? Exactly. So where life is at stake, we understand the value. But where there's $200,000, which is a very small amount for many companies, to lose $200,000, it's just it's a rounding error on the company balance sheet. Yeah. But if we can equate the importance of getting it right and the long-term value of having well-trained people, then everything is more efficient and that training pays for itself many, many times over.
Absolutely. So you and I could talk about this all day. Anything else that you want to share with us today, Chris?
Oh, it's an open question. Yes, something about aardvarks. No, as it relates to training, anyone working in the learning and development space, whether directly delivering training, hiring trainers, supporting trainees, supporting employees, you can't afford to ignore what happens after trainees leave the room. So whenever you are setting up training, whenever you are hiring training or delivering training, make sure something happens after the training to help reinforce, remind, and get the value for the people who've invested in that training.
And I know you told us that you have some examples on your website. So tell our listeners about that as well.
I do. So if you get the book, there are links in the book to the website. So that's one easy way. So you don't have to remember a URL. Just remember the title of the book, 39 Ways to Make Training Stick. And if you want to come and find me, I'm at chrisfenning.com. And there's a little resources button at the top of the website. And there's a ton of free stuff on there, including full examples of the things that I use in my communications training. The multi-part email lists, video series, entire workbooks, challenges, quiz series, all of that is available for you to have a look at and get inspired for your own make it stick methods.
Well, this has been wonderful. And I'm so excited that there's some free resources out there because I think people can definitely take advantage of that. We, of course, will have all of your links listed on Spotify with this episode and on YouTube. So, Chris, thank you so much for joining me today. I so appreciate having you on here. It has been one of the fun perks of my job is getting to do the podcast, but so great to really also be a part of your book and be a part of this whole, training initiative.
Well, thank you very much. It's been absolutely wonderful being here on EdTech Speaks. And the book wouldn't have been there without you and many of the others in the group. But you contribute. Oh, God, I'm stumbling on my words here. Your contribution was so valuable. And that is why your name is in the book.
Well, thank you. I so appreciate it. And I hope everyone enjoyed this episode of EdTech Speaks. Join us each month as we bring in experts to keep you updated on the trends of the industry. Until next time, keep learning.
Thank you for listening to EdTech Speaks with EdTech strategist Cher Downing. To learn more about the services Downing EdTech and its staff can provide you, find us at www.downingedtech.com. If you enjoyed today's podcast, be sure to share it. We'd also like to hear from you regarding any suggestions for topics or guests and the value you received from our show. Check back for new podcasts with featured guests at www.downingedtech.com/podcast.